Today, we gather to reflect on a pivotal yet often overlooked chapter in our nation's history, the War of 1812, which some historians have aptly termed America's second war for independence. This conflict, occurring just 3 decades after the American colonies secured their freedom from British rule, is a testament to the enduring struggle for sovereignty and national identity. While the Revolutionary War is celebrated with fervor, the War of 1812 remains shrouded in obscurity, despite its significant implications for the young United States. The context of the war. The roots of the War of 1812 can be traced back to unresolved issues from the American Revolution. Even after gaining independence, the United States found itself entangled in a web of economic and diplomatic challenges posed by Great Britain. The British continued to exert influence over American trade and politics, leading to rising tensions. Key grievances included impressment of American sailors. The British Navy forcibly recruited American sailors into their ranks, undermining U.S. sovereignty. Trade restrictions. British blockades and trade regulations hampered American commerce, particularly affecting merchants along the eastern seaboard. Support for Native American resistance. The British provided support to Native American tribes resisting American expansion into the Northwest Territory, further inflaming hostilities. These issues culminated in President James Madison's decision to declare war on June 18, 1812. This marked a significant moment in U.S. history as it was the first time Congress formally declared war against another nation. The course of the War of 1812 unfolded over 3 tumultuous years, characterized by a series of military engagements that tested the resolve of the fledgling nation. Key battles and events. Invasion of Canada. The war began with an ambitious American campaign to invade Canada, which was then a British territory. However, initial attempts were met with fierce resistance from British forces and their native allies, particularly at the Battle of Queenston Heights. Burning of Washington, D.C. In August 1814. British forces captured Washington, D.C., burning key government buildings including the White House. This event shocked the nation and underscored the vulnerability of America's capital. Battle of Fort McHenry. The defense of Fort McHenry in Baltimore became a defining moment of the war, as British ships bombarded the fort. Francis Scott Key penned what would become the Star-Spangled Banner, capturing the spirit of resilience amidst adversity. Battle of New Orleans. Perhaps the most famous battle occurred after the Treaty of Ghent had been signed, but before news reached America. Under General Andrew Jackson's leadership, American forces achieved a stunning victory against a larger British army on January 8, 1815. This battle not only boosted national pride but also solidified Jackson's status as a national hero. The aftermath and significance. The War of 1812 concluded with the signing of the Treaty of Ghent on December 24, 1814. While no territorial changes occurred and many issues remained unresolved, several significant outcomes emerged. National identity. The war fostered a sense of unity among Americans and contributed to a burgeoning national identity distinct from European influences. Military legacy. The conflict highlighted both strengths and weaknesses in U.S. military capabilities, leading to future reforms and a stronger naval presence. Political consequences. The Federalist Party's opposition to the war led to its decline, paving the way for an era dominated by Democratic Republicans and fostering a one-party system for nearly 2 decades. In conclusion, while often overshadowed by its predecessor, the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812 was indeed America's second war for independence, a struggle that reaffirmed our sovereignty and resilience as a nation. As we reflect on this chapter in our history, Let us remember those who fought bravely for our rights and freedoms once again against British tyranny. Let us honor their legacy by ensuring that we never forget this critical moment that shaped our nation's path towards independence and self-determination. We delve into a significant yet often overlooked chapter of American history, the War of 1812. This conflict, frequently dubbed America's Second War for Independence, arose from a confluence of factors that reflected the geopolitical tensions of the early 19th century. Understanding the main causes of the War of 1812 is essential not only for grasping the complexities of this period, but also for appreciating the evolution of American identity and sovereignty. The context leading to war, the early 1800s, were marked by a tumultuous international landscape dominated by the Napoleonic Wars, which pitted Great Britain against France and their respective allies. The United States, having recently secured its independence, found itself caught in the crossfire of these larger conflicts. Several key issues contributed to the mounting tensions that ultimately led to war. Trade restrictions. One of the primary catalysts for the War of 1812 was Britain's imposition of trade restrictions aimed at undermining American commerce with France. In an effort to block neutral trade that could benefit their enemy, Britain enacted the Orders in Council in 1807, which required American ships to obtain special licenses to trade with Europe. These restrictions severely limited American economic opportunities and were viewed as illegal under international law, provoking widespread resentment among American merchants and politicians alike. 13. Impressment of American sailors. The British practice of impressment, or forcibly recruiting American sailors into the Royal Navy, was another significant grievance. British naval officers claimed that many impressed sailors were British deserters, however. This often included American citizens. The impressment issue became a rallying point for those advocating for war, as it was seen as a direct affront to U.S. sovereignty and national honor. High-profile incidents like the Chesapeake Leopard affair, where British forces boarded an American ship and impressed sailors, exemplified this violation and heightened public outrage. 25. Support for Native American resistance. Another critical factor leading to the War of 1812 was British military support for Native American tribes resisting American expansion into the Northwest Territory. As settlers moved westward, they encountered fierce resistance from Native Americans who sought to protect their lands and way of life. Many Americans believed that Britain was inciting these conflicts by supplying arms and support to native tribes, further inflaming tensions between the two nations. 14. Expansionist ambitions. The desire for territorial expansion played a role in shaping U.S. foreign policy during this period. Some American leaders viewed Canada as a potential target for annexation, believing that a successful war could allow the United States to gain control over British-held territories in North America. This ambition was partly driven by a belief that defeating Britain would eliminate its influence on the continent and open up new lands for settlement. 36. National honor and sovereignty. A prevailing sentiment among many Americans was the need to uphold national honor in response to perceived British insults and aggressions. The ongoing impressment of sailors and trade restrictions were seen not just as economic issues, but as direct challenges to U.S. sovereignty. Politicians and citizens alike felt that failing to respond militarily would signal weakness on the part of the young nation. 24. The road to war. As tensions escalated, a group of pro-war congressmen known as the War Hawks emerged in Congress, led by figures such as Henry Clay and John C. Calhoun. These young leaders advocated for military action against Britain, arguing that it was necessary to defend national honor and protect American interests. Their fervor contrasted sharply with more cautious voices in New England, where many feared that war would devastate trade and lead to greater economic hardship. 35. On June 1, 1812, President James Madison delivered a message to Congress outlining grievances against Britain and calling for a declaration of war. On June 18, Congress officially declared war against Great Britain, marking a pivotal moment in U.S. history. 6. The War of 1812 was driven by a complex interplay of factors including trade restrictions, impressment of sailors, support for Native American resistance, expansionist ambitions, and a desire to uphold national honor. While often overshadowed by its predecessor, the Revolutionary War, this conflict played a crucial role in shaping America's identity as an independent nation. As we reflect on this period in our history, let us remember that understanding these causes is essential not only for appreciating our past, but also for recognizing how they continue to influence our national discourse today. We gather to explore the profound impact of the War of 1812 on American society and culture, often referred to as America's Second War for Independence. This conflict not only tested the young nation's resolve but also catalyzed significant transformations in various aspects of American life, from national identity to cultural expressions. The legacy of the War of 1812 continues to resonate through our history. The context of the war before delving into its impacts. It is essential to understand the context in which the War of 1812 occurred. The United States, having recently emerged victorious from the Revolutionary War, faced numerous challenges as it sought to establish itself on the world stage. The nation was divided along political lines, with tensions brewing between different regions and parties. The war itself was fueled by a combination of factors including trade restrictions imposed by Britain, impressment of American sailors, and British support for Native American resistance against American expansion. National identity and unity. One of the most significant impacts of the War of 1812 was its role in shaping a national identity. Prior to the war, many Americans identified primarily with their states rather than as citizens of a unified nation. However, as the war progressed and culminated in key victories, most notably at Fort McHenry and New Orleans, Americans began to see themselves as part of a larger whole. This shift in perspective fostered a sense of unity that transcended regional differences. Emergence of American symbols. The war also gave rise to new national symbols that would come to represent American ideals. The Star-Spangled Banner, inspired by Francis Scott Key's poem during the defense of Fort McHenry, became a powerful emblem of resilience and patriotism. Similarly, the flag that flew over the fort became a symbol of national pride. These symbols helped solidify a collective identity among Americans and fostered a spirit of nationalism that would endure long after the war. New heroes and leaders. The War of 1812 produced new heroes who would become integral to American folklore and history. Figures such as General Andrew Jackson emerged as national icons following their military successes. Jackson's victory at the Battle of New Orleans not only secured his place in history but also contributed to a sense of triumph that resonated across the nation. These heroes served as embodiments of American values, inspiring future generations to embrace their identity as Americans. Cultural shifts. The aftermath of the War of 1812 also ushered in notable cultural shifts within American society. As national pride surged, so too did artistic expressions that reflected this newfound confidence. Literature and arts. In literature and arts, there was a marked shift towards themes that celebrated American life and landscapes. Writers such as Washington Irving and James Fenimore Cooper began to explore distinctly American themes in their works, moving away from European influences. This period saw the emergence of American Romanticism, which emphasized individualism, nature, and national pride. Artists also began to focus on American subjects in their paintings. For instance, George Caleb Bingham's works celebrated everyday American life and democracy, portraying common people rather than historical figures or European subjects. This artistic movement paralleled a broader cultural renaissance that sought to define what it meant to be American. Music and national anthem. The war's cultural impact extended into music as well. The Star-Spangled Banner, which became the national anthem, encapsulated the spirit of resilience during wartime. Its adoption as an anthem symbolized not only national pride but also a collective memory rooted in sacrifice and struggle. Social changes. The War of 1812 also prompted significant social changes within American society, particularly regarding gender roles and the status of minority groups. Women's contributions. Women played crucial roles during the war, managing homes while men were away fighting and serving as nurses or even disguising themselves as men to fight on the front lines. Their contributions challenged traditional gender roles and laid groundwork for future movements advocating for women's rights. The war highlighted women's capabilities beyond domestic spheres and contributed to early discussions about gender equality in America. African Americans and Native Americans. The war had complex implications for African Americans and Native Americans as well. Many enslaved individuals seized opportunities presented by the conflict. Some fought for the British in exchange for promises of freedom. This participation underscored contradictions within a nation that proclaimed liberty while maintaining slavery. For Native Americans, however, the aftermath was dire. Many tribes had allied with Britain in hopes of protecting their lands from American expansionism. However, post-war treaties often disregarded their rights, leading to significant loss of territory and autonomy. Economic changes. The War of 1812 also spurred economic changes that would shape America's development in subsequent decades. Manufacturing growth as British blockades hampered trade during the war. Americans were compelled to become more self-sufficient. This necessity led to increased investment in domestic manufacturing capabilities. The war acted as a catalyst for industrial growth, laying foundations for what would become America's Industrial Revolution. Transportation improvements. The post-war period saw significant advancements in transportation infrastructure as well. Recognizing the need for improved logistics during wartime highlighted deficiencies in existing systems. Thus, investments were made in roads, canals, and eventually railroads. These developments facilitated commerce and contributed to westward expansion. Political consequences. The political landscape following the War of 1812 was markedly altered as well. Decline of Federalist Party. The Federalist Party's opposition to the war ultimately led to its decline after it was perceived as unpatriotic, especially after their Hartford Convention meetings were viewed with suspicion during wartime. This decline allowed for greater political unity under Democratic-Republican leadership during what became known as the era of good feelings. Expansionist policies. With newfound confidence stemming from military successes, America adopted more aggressive expansionist policies post-war. The notion of manifest destiny began to take hold, an ideology asserting that it was America's divine right to expand across North America, which would have profound implications for indigenous peoples and future U.S.-Canada relations. In conclusion, the War of 1812 had far-reaching impacts on American society and culture that continue to resonate today. It fostered a sense of national identity, produced new symbols and heroes, catalyzed cultural shifts in literature and art, prompted social changes regarding gender roles and minority rights, stimulated economic growth through manufacturing and transportation improvements, and reshaped political dynamics within the nation. As we reflect on this pivotal moment in our history, Let us recognize how these changes laid foundations for modern America, a nation defined by its diversity yet united by common ideals forged through struggle and resilience. Thank you for your attention as we continue exploring this rich tapestry woven from our past experiences. Tecumseh, the Shawnee leader whose vision and leadership played a pivotal role in the War of 1812. Often regarded as a symbol of Native American resistance against U.S. expansion. Tecumseh's efforts to unite various tribes and his alliance with British forces were critical in shaping the course of the war and the future of indigenous peoples in North America. Tecumseh's life and legacy are not merely historical footnotes. They represent a profound struggle for sovereignty, identity, and justice in the face of relentless encroachment. As we explore Tecumseh's role in the War of 1812, we will examine his motivations, strategies, alliances, and the lasting impact of his actions on American society and indigenous relations. Early life and background. To understand Tecumseh's significance in the War of 1812, we must first delve into his early life. Born around 1768 in present-day Ohio, Tecumseh grew up during a tumultuous period marked by increasing European American settlement and displacement of native peoples. His early experiences with violence and loss shaped his worldview and ignited a passion for protecting indigenous lands. The Shawnee Confederacy. Tecumseh emerged as a leader within the Shawnee tribe, which faced constant pressure from American settlers seeking land. In response to this threat, he sought to create a confederacy of tribes that would resist American expansion. This vision was rooted in the belief that unity among native nations was essential for survival. Tecumseh's charisma and oratory skills allowed him to rally diverse tribes around a common cause. The role of Tecumseh's brother, Tenskwatawa, known as the Prophet, played a crucial role in this movement. Tenskwatawa advocated for a return to traditional indigenous ways and spiritual practices as a means of resisting assimilation into European American culture. Together, Tecumseh and Tenskwatawa worked to inspire native peoples to reclaim their heritage and resist encroachment. The prelude to war as tensions escalated between Native Americans and American settlers. It became clear that conflict was inevitable. The U.S. government's aggressive policies toward westward expansion further alienated indigenous communities. Tecumseh recognized that war was approaching and began to prepare for it. Tecumseh's War, 1808 to 1811. Before the War of 1812 officially began, Tecumseh engaged in what is often referred to as Tecumseh's War or Tecumseh's Rebellion. This conflict aimed to assert native sovereignty over their lands in the Indiana Territory. Despite initial successes against American forces led by General William Henry Harrison at the Battle of Tippecanoe in 1811, Tecumseh's Confederacy ultimately suffered significant setbacks. The impact of Tippecanoe. The Battle of Tippecanoe was a turning point for Tecumseh's movement. Although his forces initially held their ground, Harrison's victory undermined Tecumseh's efforts to unite tribes against American encroachment. Following this battle, Tecumseh sought alliances with British forces as he recognized that cooperation with them could bolster his cause against American expansion. The outbreak of the War of 1812 on June 18, 1812. President James Madison declared war on Britain, marking the official beginning of the War of 1812 for Tecumseh and his Confederacy. This conflict presented an opportunity to resist American aggression more effectively by aligning with British forces. Alliance with Britain. Tecumseh's decision to ally with Britain was driven by a shared interest. Both sought to halt American expansion into indigenous territories. He traveled extensively throughout various tribes, urging them to join him in supporting the British cause against the United States. His ability to unite diverse groups under a common banner was remarkable, bringing together tribes that had historically been rivals. The capture of Fort Detroit, one of Tecumseh's most significant contributions during the War of 1812, was his role in the capture of Fort Detroit in August 1812. Working alongside British General Isaac Brock, Tecumseh's strategic leadership proved instrumental in this victory. He orchestrated ambushes against American supply lines and utilized psychological tactics to instill fear among American troops. The surrender at Detroit, on August 16, 1812. General William Hull surrendered Fort Detroit without a fight after being outmaneuvered by Tecumseh's forces. This victory not only bolstered British morale but also secured important territory for indigenous allies. Key battles involving Tecumseh throughout the War of 1812. Tecumseh continued to lead his confederacy into battle alongside British forces. His military acumen was evident in several key engagements that shaped the outcome of the war. The Siege of Fort Meigs in May 1813. Tecumseh participated in the Siege of Fort Meigs, where he aimed to capture this strategic stronghold held by American forces under Harrison's command. Although they failed to take the fort, Tecumseh's leadership during this campaign showcased his ability to coordinate complex military operations involving multiple tribes. The Battle of Lake Erie. The tide began to turn against British forces following their defeat at the Battle of Lake Erie on September 10, 1813. Commodore Oliver Hazard Perry's naval victory disrupted British supply lines and forced them into retreat. This defeat had significant implications for Tecumseh and his confederacy as they found themselves increasingly isolated. The Battle of Thames, the culmination of Tecumseh's military efforts, came at the Battle of Thames on October 5, 1813, facing off against Harrison's advancing troops. Tecumseh fought valiantly but ultimately met his end during this battle. His death marked a profound loss for indigenous resistance movements across North America. Legacy and impact on indigenous peoples. Tecumseh's legacy extends far beyond his military achievements. He became an enduring symbol of indigenous resistance against colonial encroachment. A martyr for indigenous rights. Following his death at the Battle of Thames, Tecumseh was revered as a martyr among Native Americans. His vision for unity among tribes inspired future generations to continue fighting for their rights and sovereignty despite overwhelming odds. Impact on U.S. indigenous relations. The aftermath of Tecumseh's death saw a significant decline in organized indigenous resistance against U.S. expansionism. The failure to maintain unity among tribes led to further losses in territory and autonomy for Native peoples across North America. Cultural memory. Tecumseh's story has been immortalized in literature, art, and oral traditions among indigenous communities. His commitment to preserving native lands serves as an enduring reminder of the struggles faced by indigenous peoples throughout history. In conclusion, Tecumseh played an instrumental role in shaping the events surrounding the War of 1812 through his leadership, strategic alliances with British forces, and efforts to unite diverse native tribes against American expansionism. His legacy continues to resonate today as a symbol of resilience and resistance against colonial oppression. The Hartford Convention of 1814 to 1815. This gathering of Federalist leaders from New England was not merely a reaction to the ongoing War of 1812. It represented a significant turning point in American politics that would have lasting implications for the nation. As we delve into the intricacies of the Hartford Convention, we will examine its causes, proceedings, proposed amendments, and the profound impact it had on American political dynamics. Historical context. To fully appreciate the significance of the Hartford Convention, we must first understand the historical context in which it occurred. The early 19th century was a time of great political turmoil in the United States. The nation was grappling with issues of national identity, regional interests, and the balance of power between state and federal authorities. The War of 1812, the War of 1812, often referred to as Mr. Madison's War, was a conflict between the United States and Great Britain that stemmed from various grievances, including trade restrictions, impressment of American sailors, and British support for Native American resistance against American expansion. The war was particularly unpopular in New England, where economic interests were heavily tied to trade with Britain. As the war dragged on and American military successes were limited, discontent grew among Federalists in New England. They felt marginalized by the Democratic-Republican administration under President James Madison, and believed that their region's economic interests were being sacrificed for a war they opposed. The rise of federalism. The Federalist Party had been one of the dominant political forces in the early years of the Republic, advocating for a strong central government and close ties with Britain. However, by the time of the Hartford Convention, the party was in decline. The rise of the Democratic Republicans, led by figures such as Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, shifted political power away from Federalists and towards agrarian interests concentrated in the South and West. The Hartford Convention. Proceedings. The Hartford Convention convened from December 15, 1814, to January 5, 1815, in Hartford, Connecticut. Delegates from 5 New England states, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, and Vermont, gathered to discuss their grievances regarding federal policies and the ongoing war. Objectives of the convention. The primary objectives of the Hartford Convention were to address concerns about federal overreach and to propose constitutional amendments that would protect New England's interests. While some delegates considered more radical measures such as secession from the Union, moderates prevailed in advocating for amendments rather than outright separation. Proposed amendments. The convention ultimately produced a report outlining several proposed amendments to the U.S. Constitution aimed at restoring what they perceived as a balance of power between regions. Key proposals included limiting trade embargoes. Any trade embargo should last no longer than 60 days without congressional approval. Supermajority requirements. A 2/3 majority in Congress would be required for declarations of war, or for admitting new states into the Union. Abolishing the 3/5 compromise. This proposal aimed to eliminate the representation given to enslaved individuals in slave states when calculating congressional representation. Limiting presidential power. Proposals included limiting presidents to a single term and preventing consecutive terms for presidents from the same state. These amendments reflected both regional grievances and broader concerns about federal authority. Immediate aftermath. As delegates prepared to present their resolutions to Congress, significant events unfolded that would overshadow their efforts. On January 8, 1815, just days after the convention adjourned, General Andrew Jackson achieved a decisive victory at the Battle of New Orleans. This victory bolstered national pride and shifted public sentiment in favor of the war effort. Simultaneously, peace negotiations were underway in Ghent, Belgium. By February 1815, news of the Treaty of Ghent reached America, officially ending hostilities between the United States and Great Britain. The timing could not have been worse for Federalists. Their calls for constitutional amendments appeared increasingly irrelevant as peace was restored. Perception and consequences. The Hartford Convention quickly became synonymous with treasonous sentiments among many Americans. Democratic Republicans seized upon this opportunity to paint Federalists as disloyal and out of touch with national interests. Political cartoons depicted Federalist delegates as cowardly figures seeking refuge with King George III, a powerful image that resonated with an electorate eager for unity after wartime struggles. As a result of these perceptions, decline of federalism, the Federalist Party suffered irreparable damage. Following the convention, their association with disloyalty led to diminishing electoral support across New England. Political realignment. The Democratic Republicans emerged as the dominant political force in America. By capitalizing on anti-federalist sentiment and emphasizing national unity post-war, they solidified their power. Legacy of secessionist sentiment. Although secession was not pursued at Hartford, discussions surrounding it laid groundwork for future debates about states' rights, a theme that would re-emerge during sectional conflicts leading up to the Civil War. Broader political implications. The Hartford Convention had broader implications for American politics beyond its immediate aftermath. National identity. The convention highlighted regional tensions within an emerging national identity. As New Englanders expressed dissatisfaction with federal policies perceived as favoring Southern interests, it underscored growing sectional divisions that would shape political discourse for decades. States' rights versus federal authority. The resolutions adopted at Hartford emphasized states' rights, a principle that would continue to resonate throughout American history. The idea that states could assert authority over perceived unconstitutional actions by the federal government gained traction among various factions over time. Influence on future movements. The legacy of Hartford can also be seen in later movements advocating for states' rights and nullification. While these ideas were initially championed by Federalists at Hartford, they found new life among Southern leaders during debates over slavery and secession leading up to the Civil War. Conclusion. In conclusion, while often overshadowed by other historical events surrounding the War of 1812, the Hartford Convention played a crucial role in shaping American politics during this formative period. It served as both a reflection of regional grievances against an increasingly centralized federal government and an early example of organized dissent within American political life. As we reflect on this pivotal moment in history, one marked by both ambition and miscalculation, we must recognize its enduring legacy within our political landscape today. The tensions between state sovereignty and federal authority continue to resonate in contemporary debates about governance and representation. Thank you for your attention as we explore this important chapter in our nation's history.